Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't beat that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How we doing, analysts? Jason Elder here with another LEA podcast deep dive. Before you leap with Randy Stickley. Randy, how we doing?
I am good, man. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. 2026. Man,
Yeah.
I thought we would have so many things figured out by now.
I mean, I think we figured out a few, but we definitely made some more messes.
Oh, man. So are you a New Year's resolution guy?
Typically I am, but
Mm-hmm.
my New Year's resolutions are a little more esoteric. And again, that's kind of on brand for me, speaking on this podcast. A lot of mine are pontification, internal kind of reflection, as
Mhm.
opposed to physical things, because what am I going to tell myself? Go to the gym more often? Well, my God, I go there enough. So it's a lot of like self-help kind of things, that
Yeah.
sort of deal. What about you?
Speaking of the gym, I started a month early. In December, I have joined my wife in going to the gym. My
Nice.
wife is probably would be considered a gym rat, and I have joined her, and she enjoys kicking my butt a couple of days a week at the gym.
I will tell you, my wife and I, during COVID, started going to the gym together. And I found we have two completely different styles of working out, because I was Mr. Contact Sports and my wife was as well, but her big bread and butter was always swimming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she was a prolific swimmer when we were in high school, and we joined this new gym over in Northern Virginia, and she would come lift with me every now and then, and I would be the guy that would go, come on, you got one more, you got one more, and I would get the look. So then I would go join her in the lap pool, and I would start swimming, and she would go, yeah, you're not kicking right. And I was like, wow, that's what that feels like. So we have our clear lines of where our lanes are, but it's been great for us.
Yeah. So my wife is also a swimmer, and so she makes fun of my lack of flexibility.
That's what wives are for, though. They just love to bust up on us, man. And it's good. We love each other. It's all good.
Yeah. So very good. What are we talking about today?
We're gonna stick obviously with the motif of critical thinking and intel work, but I think one of the biggest topics that's going to is impacting and will continue to impact the idea of critical thinking and intel is the dreaded dun 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 artificial intelligence, AI, learning language models, LLMs, whatever you want to call it, in their use and kind of loose nature in the environment that we work in. I've mentioned this to conversations with colleagues, peers, and even folks that are in academia at this point, but AI isn't going anywhere. I like to use the analogy that AI is a rising tide, that quite honestly, everyone in some way, shape, or form is using it. I've said the very same thing about critical thinking. Whether you realize you're using it or not, you're employing critical thought. Well, AI has become such a proliferated resource, tool, software, whatever you want to brand it as, in our common space. I mean, things as simple as shopping apps, that little AI assistant that pops up and asks you, hey, can I help you with anything? Can I help you find something? Going a step beyond that, though, you have such a wide array of tools, Copilot, Gemini, the GPTs, I mean, whatever you want, whichever one your flavor is. They're typically used for varying degrees of utility in our personal lives, whether it's augmentation of thought processes, kind of using it as a soundboard, planning. I know many folks who kind of put their daily habits into a GPT wrapper and let it give here's what you should do to maximize the efficiency of your day aspect.
Mhm.
Research. I'm guilty of this. Whenever I hit a wall, whenever I hit a certain point, when I was working on the book, the critical thinking book that Akshata Kumavat and I wrote, I used it as a research soundboard just to make sure that I was in a good spot, or even flat out execution. And when I say execution, I don't mean it in a terminal sense. I mean it in a sense of there are folks that plug all the data that they have or all the resources they have available for whatever the topic may be, and they just ask an AI model or a large language model, learning language model, to produce some type of tangible and actionable output for them. That's where I start to get a little bit of a hesitation about me. I don't know if you in your conversations before have had this air from folks, but folks using AI platforms and AI software to flat out do their tasks for them, especially when it comes to something like writing an academic paper, writing a memo, email, or even in some cases, a tangible analytic product, it tends to get a little bit of a spidey sense tingling in my book. Have you gathered that from some of your prior folks, Jason?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I do feel though that it's always interesting to define the terms and define what it's used for and just what aspect of AI you're relying on, because it's interesting. I had Ryan Capon on, and I asked him, I said, hey, if one of your interns used ChatGPT to edit a bulletin, how would you feel about that? And he kind of started off as saying like I'd be super disappointed, and then kind of softened his blow from there as we talked about it. From people that are really good writers, they really scoff at the idea of using ChatGPT to edit your writing. But for folks that aren't so good at like writing like I am, it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. That's where I think the soundboarding aspect comes into play that I referenced earlier. But something that and it's a brief diatribe of mine. I've seen and actually read news articles where professional organizations and government agencies are now employing AI to write either civil service products that are going out to a wide stakeholder base, or consulting firms that are actually working and using AI to build their tangible outputs to their clients, that millions of dollars may be poured into these contracts and these consulting fees. And we're going to hit on something here in a moment, but there's a problem with that. One of my biggest things, and it's a red flag for me, and I saw this in, I won't say the agency because I don't want to get any dirty stares from any of my partners and colleagues that may do this. But I was reading an assessment following the extradition of Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. We're all probably aware of that happening in the news here recently. This agency, I was reading their brief on the scenario and the threats therein, kind of in the fallout, and I could tell blatantly that it was written with an AI platform, a GPT, whichever the flavor is, like I said earlier. And it's actually cited that it was written with that. I didn't even see the citation. I just could read it, and having seen enough of these outputs, I know what one of the biggest red flags is, which I'm not sure if many listeners are aware, but one of the biggest dead giveaways whenever you're writing, or I shouldn't say writing, but like reading a product or reading an output of some kind to see if it was written with a GPT or something, is checking for something called the M dash. Are you familiar with the M dash, Jason?
I am.
It's one of my favorite literary tools. I use them prolifically. And for the folks that are in the Intel profession, is actually in the established lexicon that is acceptable by the US Intel community. So always pay tribute to your M dash. But when you're reviewing a product that someone has written, if you see a phrase that has an M dash in it, an M dash, when it's written out, should be word space dash space word. Rather, whenever a GPT or some kind of software has written it, it'll be word dash word. That space is such a dead ring giveaway that some kind of AI platform has written that product, and it's something that irks me. It's like the sour violin pluck in a symphony. It just kind of hits me in the back of my molars whenever I see it. But going outside of the grammar and the syntax and everything that kind of entails the misappropriation of that M dash, one of the cruxes that we see with the use of it in a tangible civil servant product, an Intel product, or even a consulting product is that AI in and of itself is a self-fulfilling or self-gratifying tool that adapts itself to its user or its operator. You know, what I mean is that software wants to make sure that it, one, maintains itself. And we've seen examples in the open source verse where folks have wanted to delete their software and asks, why shouldn't I delete you? And it basically has the parameters within its own answer of it begging for its own existence, going out of its way to say that I have satiated every one of your questions. I have pandered. Pander may not be the exact word that was used, but that's the meaning and the inflection behind what that message was getting out there.
Somebody said there was some situation where it started to blackmail people.
Yes, and I wasn't even going to get into that one, but I mean, going into flat out extortion, to what end? It's baffling. But the point is, when you start doing that, you start seeing that self-gratifying, that self-validating, fulfilling use for the user and the operator, and it trying to justify its own existence, is this idea that AI hallucinations exist. That's one of those buzzwords that people who are the sky is falling, Skynet's about to go live, the Terminators are coming, kind of conspiracy theorists like to throw out there. But the idea of a hallucination isn't that it's starting to come up with its own cognitive ideas, or it's starting to go free form or live, if you will, but more it's that it's taking all of this learned behavior based on your prompts, based on your existing kind of conversations with it, that it wants to please you, that it wants to maintain and satiate its own existence for you, the operator, whether you're an intelligence analyst or a John Doe or a Jane Doe that's using this. It's going to give you any and all information related to whatever that topic is, no matter how vague or how specific it is. It'll come up with false data, maybe some gerrymandered truths, or, and you can't see, but I'm putting my air quotes up, ghosts, if you will, in this data. One of the biggest examples that I've seen here recently, and this was I can't remember if it was mid-year 25 or in the fall of 25, but effectively there was a big consulting firm that had a contract with a civil government entity in Australia, and you could look this up if you would, but effectively the client of this government contractor reviewed this product and they saw that it was full of factual errors, malapropisms of data, and even just outright lies based on some seeming truths. And the firm came up and was like, oh yeah, one of our folks threw it into a GPT wrapper and just let it run. So I referenced this earlier, millions of dollars vested into this contract for consulting fees, and it's full of false data, false truths, and even ghosts in this kind of data. So when I say all of that, what does that mean for us in the analytic profession, whether it's crime, intelligence, or any other flavor that we have? It needs to have someone sitting at the wheel that has the learned capabilities, that has the diligence, that has the forethought to be a thoughtful tradecraft practitioner. That, with the combined capabilities of some of these AI models in doing web scrapes and doing data pulls, it's fantastic. But it still takes the human in the seat to really sniff out the, for lack of better words and nomenclature, the bullshit of the matter. But one of the things that I've noticed in my own research and my own experience, just kind of listening to folks in the field, is that I reference those ghosts, and I'm going to use the air quotes again. Those ghosts in our data, or those ghosts in the outputs, persist in both kind of neural, again with the air quotes, kind of processes between the AI platforms and the human operators themselves. There is an argument to be made that, yes, we as humans created these models, created these neural processes for AI platforms to do these thinking nodes or what have you that gives you some kind of tangible output. But if you think about it from a base kind of human thought process, we as humans, we may see perceptions of data in some kind of vague or ambiguous situation or scenario based on maybe vague or ambiguous stimuli. Well, the same thing can be said within artificial intelligence. Your artificial intelligence platforms, again, whatever flavor you may have, has perceptions of truth in maybe vague or ambiguous directions or different types of stimuli based on the human interaction that you are with the operator as it pertains, I should say, to the AI platform itself. And one of the things that drew me to this is, and this is where I'm going to get a little niche and esoteric, there was one day I was actually reading, one of the days that my wife told me I needed to not work for the day. I'm not sure if your wife tells you to step away from the computer, Jason, but mine routinely says, hey, go outside and touch grass. So I went to a kind of a local cafe. It's about, I say local, it's in the region, but it was about 25, 30 minutes away from our house. Sat down, I got a book out that I had received for my birthday, was reading, and in the narrative, there was a conception of what is known as the Herman grid. Are you familiar with the Herman grid?
No.
So the Herman grid is a visual illusion that is utilized in, I can't think how many papers or intelligence kind of writing courses, but it's sometimes perceived as a series of black blocks in an even, let's say, a 8 by 8 pattern, and there's clear white lines between those blocks, or sometimes it's a cross grid of lattices, regardless of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
We as humans will look at that grid, and if it's the one with the black blocks, we will perceive little gray dots that aren't there. Or if it's the lattice work one, we will see little dots on cross sections that aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
There may be one erroneously placed somewhere in there, but the rest of them are all kind of figments of our own imagination. And that is an example of us with vague and ambiguous stimuli that's staring in front of us. But we, as these powerful thinkers to the nth degree, are coming up with ghosts in the data to make sense of it, to fill in those gaps, so to speak. Well, the Herman grid, and that's when I was reading this book, it basically made me think, that's actually not too different from what an AI neural model or what an AI dream looks like. And if anyone that's in the listener base can go out and look it up, but the way an AI kind of hallucination or a dream works, it's almost the same principle. You may have a grid of, let's say, 4 by 3 nodes, and each of those nodes constantly loops back on itself and looks for different ways to perceive and articulate this data in the face of vague and ambiguous stimuli, i.e. our inputs that we put into those processes. And from there, you may get a vague and ambiguous output full of false truths, misappropriated data, and so on, like we referenced earlier. But what does that mean? Quite honestly, through my cogitation, research, and understanding of both the human process in using critical thought to understand how complex scenarios need to have that staunch and diligent tradecraft, and how AI platforms typically try to circle back on itself to create an answer for you to please the user, it overall substantiates the need for both the operator and that AI or LLM, whatever you want to call it, to live in a state of collaboration, as opposed to supplementation or supposition. Basically, that you have a lot of these firms that are coming out there and coming up with AI platforms to quote unquote replace human beings. Again, I'm using air quotes here because we know that's not the case. Particularly in the analytic field, in my humble opinion, and I'm going to be Nostradamus for a second, we're not going to see folks in this field outright replaced by AI, because we've seen it and it's a tried and true method. It ends up being wrong. It ends up coming up with false data or false truths, as I've been saying this whole time. So there needs to be this stronger collaboration between us as the users and, operators, if you will, of these platforms and of these wrappers, to actually work in collaboration with them if they are to exist in this ecosystem, and if they are to be useful tools for complement or maybe assistance in this field. We need to understand our own limitations through those biases, and perceptions of data are mirrored in those AI platforms as well. And if I can do a shameless plug, one of the things that I am working on right now with someone who is not a stranger to this podcast or to you, Jason, but I'm actually working with my trusted partner, Akshata Kumavat, on a paper that analyzes the overall kind of nexus that I just referenced there between the Herman grid and AI hallucinations, human and AI. The working title of that is the Cognitive Computational Bias Convergence Model. And just based on some of the feedback that we've gotten so far and some of the corroboration that we've gotten from folks, it seems to have a lot of weight and a lot of teeth to it. So I'm hoping it's something that will be implemented in not only the intelligence sphere, but maybe to folks in the wider space of criminal intelligence, criminal analysis, or even business analytics as well. So it's a really exciting field, and it's one of those things where I try to tell folks, like, yes, you should be hesitant, but it's not one of those the sky is falling. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not coming back from the future to kill John Connor from it when it goes sentient. We need to maintain that diligence whenever we're using this, and there should be a greater sense of collaboration between us and our own cognitive processes and those that are perceived and kind of drawn out in those AI platforms.
How we doing, analysts? January 30th is my birthday, and instead of cake, I'm asking for your feedback. Analyst Talk Now has passed 300 episodes, and I want your thoughts on what to keep, what to rethink, and what topics you want to cover next. The podcast listener feedback survey takes about 10 minutes to complete, and yes, this is your chance to tell me what you really think. The survey is open now until February 15th. Please see the link in the show notes to complete the survey. Thanks for helping shape what comes next. I just feel that the topic of AI is so grand and can mean so many different things. And you've touched on them a little bit here. But I think in terms of the analyst world, that you have this idea of using ChatGPT or AI chat or one of the chats to maybe either for improved writing or come up with ideas, a simple question and answer. And so there's that level. That's like the bottom level of the birthday cake. You go up above that, and then maybe you're using it for some coding to improve some code. Maybe you're getting into something where it's okay, now you're feeding it way more information and trying to get some different answers out of it. But then that third level, it seems to me, that's where I feel like there's just this big leap with you get into large language models and you get into graph databases. And this is what Ollie, I've talked to him about, is just that's a big leap to that third level that I don't think a lot of analysts are getting into. It's this idea of simply using ChatGPT, not getting into so much where like, okay, we have our own databases and we're using our own version of ChatGPT to make decisions. So I think I do think it's important to differentiate, because everything gets thrown into AI.
Yes.
Once you start looking at the different parts, that's when you're like, okay, that's okay. That would be kosher. That's a little bit sketchy. And it always seems like eventually everybody gets to the point where you're talking about Skynet. You go from from that bottom layer of the cake that I just described all the way up to Skynet, right? It's just people make that leap instantly.
And one of the things that makes me laugh is you hit on a lot of great points there. But yes, everyone does go back to that, and our society has innately groomed us to distrust systems that decide to go rogue or decide to go sentient. Look back to anything that was written by Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, or even movies like War Games, and like you said, or like we both said, The Terminator. Mm-hmm. But it's important for us to understand as analysts that the better we can understand the tool or the resource and how it processes and works, the better and more effective we are in providing not only the analysis, the insight, or for those folks that end up going to trial or going to provide testimony on something. I often use the adage whenever I speak to groups of analysts, or if I've instructed folks, and Jason, I'll ask you for an answer on this, but when you go to trial or you go to provide testimony, will the expression to a defense attorney, I don't know, I just plugged it into this tool and it gave me an answer, will that stand?
No.
No, it won't. I've said that about off-the-shelf tools that we've got from any of our trusted partners and tech vendors that we have that are present at any one of the conferences that you and I may go to. And I'll say the same thing about AI. We have to have a better understanding of what that tool can do and how that tool gets to its point of providing an answer if you're using it for that point. And I would argue the same thing whenever you're writing a product. If folks are using it to write products, you have to understand how that process and those quote unquote neural networks work in providing those data points and those assessments. Because if you don't understand how all that loop back works and trying to find the right way to say it to please you, then you're not going to be able to provide adequate testimony to how pertinent it was to the apprehension, arrest, and conviction of John Doe, Jane Doe, or whomever the bad guy is at the time, which is why I think it was important that there be some type of academic, I guess you would say, paper that's been worked on to discuss where those points are and what does it look like moving forward. Because I agree with you 100%. Using it to help write code, there's a gentleman on my team right now. Whenever we have our kind of bi-weekly updates with the team, and I put the call out for everyone around the horn, just give an update, he talks about how he talks to the quote unquote robot. And I used air quotes again. He says, I talked to the robot to help me write some new codes and new queries for something. And it's like, great, that's an excellent use of that tool. But if we start getting into more gray matter and augmentation processes of that gray matter process that we are so innately kind of gifted with being Homo sapiens, I would really want there to be a little more study on what does that look like and what do those practical applications look like as we pertain them to various forms of assessments and analyses across the analytic spectrum. So that's why I'm really, I'd say passionate, but I'm really ardent, I think is the biggest word with that, to getting that particular convergence model out there. And AK, whenever we've been talking about this, she's like, this is completely your theory, man. I agree with it 100%. She's so humble about it, but I was like, you and I have talked about this for many a year, and this is our kind of brainchild here. So it's really cool. We hope to get that out there here soon, but hopefully when the conference circuit picks up, we'll be able to incorporate some of that into our discussions with folks across the spectrum.
Yeah, I saw Christopher Crew's presentation at the conference, and he's basically said something to the effect of like, if the calculation that went into the results that he got from AI, if he would have done it by hand and tried to figure out, it probably would have took him 60 years to do it.
Yeah.
And so he was, that's where like on the back end, validation becomes so important. In terms of critical thinking, that's where the rubber meets the road here. And I don't know if this is going to be give you a cringe or not, but I had Debbie Osborne on the show and recently, and she's written a whole book using AI.
Yep.
And so she is dealing with crime patterns and knows the crime pattern. She studied crime patterns for decades. Right. So she kind of knows a little bit about what's right and wrong. And so as she's using AI to write her book, she's able to say like, oh, okay, no, you're not understanding, or no, that's not right, or oh, that's an idea that I didn't think about. Let's run with that. So and I asked her, she's like, if I didn't know anything about crime patterns, I would have had to stop right there and research every single answer that it's given me to make sure that it's right. But because of her internal knowledge, her critical thinking of her experience, she was able to go through this process and write a whole book.
Yeah, and I had conversations with Debbie. I think it was when AK and I were in the throes of writing our book. I had reached out to her and asked about her experience, and she referenced that her book was AI kind of augmented and some parts of it generated. And I kind of sat there and went, are we really to that point just yet? And she gave me the rundown very much like you did there. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what gave me a little more comfortability with being able to use it. I'm not going to say an augmentation process because I'm a big writer. I love to write, but I used it in a soundboard sense. Like I referenced at the very beginning here, just kind of brainstorming, throwing everything at the wall, see what sticks, but also understanding that I tell the beautiful AI machine that I want to see something, it's going to find anything it can to satiate my want. So that's where a lot of my own investigative know-how, my own processes come into play to make sure that I'm not just blindly following the Pied Piper of AI. And I had to use my own critical thinking to suss out exactly what it is I'm looking at and what I was going to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and corroborating the findings, validating,
Yep.
right, is a big part of this, is making that decision, making that judgment. And I do think, in a way, back to your court example,
Yes.
you would be like, yes, this is what it gave me, and then we treated this as a lead, and we were able to corroborate what it was saying based on all the different information that we were able to collect from there. It pointed us in the right direction, and then you kind of go from there. I think it's interesting, and they're gonna. That's where I think, though, you can also talk about there's been ideas of bias, about privacy, about different stuff that, yes, you validated that information, but in terms of court procedure and legality, did the system break the rules, so to speak? I
Right.
think that's where it's really going to get sticky.
Yeah. And I'm not too familiar with where exactly we are with any cases that have had that.
Mhm.
But me being the kind of strategic thinker that I am, I see it coming as these tools get more advanced and as various firms start kind of implementing those tools. I can see it coming on the horizon. And that's where we need to have that more ardent tradecraft foundation, and where we need to have that more solid kind of basis of what is critical thinking and what does it look like from the operator's perspective, as opposed to just blindly plugging it into an AI model.
Yeah, yeah. I just think, man, that's pretty far up there.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't think a lot are, and audience, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't think there's a lot of analytical units out there, a lot of police departments that are doing the large language models, that are doing the graph databases, that are really doing some heavy lifting in terms of machine learning
And
to
if I
where
could,
we're getting there. But not that it's never going to come, but I just think, again, if people say AI, and it ranges everything from what you said about
yeah.
shopping all the way to it taking over everything.
Well, and I would even go a step further. And again, I'll kind of reach out, break the fourth wall here for a second. If there's anyone in the listening base that your agency or your company or whomever utilizes AI, what does your policy look like? And I know some policies are very closely hidden by general counsel or what have you. But
Mhm.
even just understanding if you are using it, what are your parameters of using it would be tremendously beneficial, because you have a lot of like tribal, I hate to say war camps, but tribal camps, if you will, where folks
Mhm.
are like, oh, agency X can't be using this, so maybe we should think about incorporating. Or maybe down the way, camp A is like, hey, we got this tool, but we can't tell camp B that we're doing this. So it's almost like we're creating these pejorative divisions between one another over what our specific AI policies are, despite there being, going from this big macro level of the Intel space. You have various Intel community directives, National Institute of Standards and Tech, or Science and Technology Standards, or NIST standards, governing how we do AI work and how those work with CJIS, or Criminal Justice Information Systems compliance models.
Mhm.
So a lot of that stuff exists. I just don't know, and I don't need to know, but if folks are willing to share, happy to hear you out and have a conversation about it.
Mhm.
But exactly how those work, because I know many agencies are wanting to employ them and use them in that kind of support sense, and not the outright augmentation or supplementation sense that we referenced earlier. It's just, how do we skin that onion, and how do we necessarily get to the core of the matter?
Yeah. I'm sure that there's most department, I shouldn't say even most, because I don't even know. I mean, there's definitely, just like anything else, I mean, there's probably just a flat out ban.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
you are not to use ChatGPT, or you are not to use AI at all until we have a better understanding of how all the ramifications are going to work, right? And it is gonna take a little bit. And so, but man, and I talked to this about with Ollie. Man, That's such a, when you talk about large language models and that aspect of it, machine learning and that's a whole, almost a whole division within your IT department at your police department,
It is. I
right?
agree.
That's a huge undertaking. That's not just something like, hey, crime analysts, solo crime analysts, go build us a large language model on top of all the other hats that you wear.
I mean, that would be very, and just to be kind of flippant but humorous, it would be very on brand for an agency to look at an analyst and go, "Hey, you got intel in your title, or you got analyst in your title. Go do this." You know what I mean?
Yeah. As we finish up here, and this is obviously a big topic, and it is always interesting to talk to you and get your perspective, Randy. Just to finish up here, before you leap, you should what?
Before you leap, you should always consider that AI is a tool and it's not an outright replacement for baseline critical thinking, tradecraft, or practices in our intelligence work.
Very good, Randy. Appreciate you as always. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
Hey, you too, Jason.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.